Hi, everyone. Welcome to our masterclass today on principled leadership, vision driven from the C-suite to the front line. Very excited to have all of you dialing in today and participating in the Zoom call as we focus on this very important topic. I aim to please and to exceed your expectations. So, want to go ahead and move forward. My name is Bruce Wren. I am the founder and a senior executive with ACE independent consulting services. And at this time, we are focusing on principled leadership primarily. So that's what I intend to focus on today. I'm about to pull up the presentation momentarily. I do want to remind you as we segue into having this conversation that I want to have your undivided attention. I want you to be present. So please put away any other electronic devices you may have that might potentially distract you. I want to make sure we have a great hour and everybody has the chance to benefit on the information we're about to go through. For the purposes of this conversation, it's just introductory as far as what the program is going to focus on. I want to point that out very clearly. So consequently, I've got four things I'm going to talk about in a variety of ways and about to go over those. It's going to be featured on PowerPoint. That's going to help me make sure I keep the presentation online as well as help make sure that everybody gets the information we're attempting to convey. With that in mind, I'm going to forge ahead, and I sincerely appreciate having everyone represented on the call today. So here's our presentation, which is principled leadership driven, vision driven from the C-suite to the front line. And you already know who I am. So without any further delay, let's forge ahead. You can think of this conceptually as being something like just a leadership checkup to see where your leadership skills are right now. All of us focus on a day-to-day basis to get better at what we do, and one of the areas which is a constant focus for everyone who's wants to move forward and wants to be the best they can possibly be and maximize their performance is certainly going to be focused in the area of leadership. Now, I like to focus on the area of principled leadership. We can all think of principled leaders who've had an enormous impact on our lives or on our culture. And certainly that's a topic that is relevant to all of us. And the better principles we convey as a leader, the better likelihood we're going to be able to lead a team to exceed expectations and to achieve shared goals collectively. So that's part of the reason I focus on principled leadership. And I want to articulate more reasons for that as we segue through the rest of the presentation. A good example to give an illustration of principled leaders in American culture, you can think of a couple of people who had enormous influences. Martin Luther King certainly had an enormous influence when he was fighting for civil rights in the 1960s. Susan B. Anthony, the women's suffrage movement and the women's right to vote and getting a constitutional amendment passed. Certainly two American examples of folks who used principled leadership to have an enormous influence on our culture and on our country. And there's many other examples, which I will illustrate some of those during this conversation. So Tom Cruise in the movie Jerry Maguire once famously said, "Help me help you." I am familiar with Tom. I had a chance to interview him about 10 years ago at a world premiere we did in a previous company I was with running leadership and learning and development internationally. And it was for his movie Jack Reacher 2. And just a fascinating individual, obviously an accomplished actor, but also this conversation is intended to help you. And that's what I really want to focus on. We're flipping the script. We want to make sure we give the tools to you that you need to succeed. And thus, I'm trying to help you. So help me help you during this conversation. And I think we'll both benefit enormously by focusing on principled leadership. As far as our mission statement, I'll briefly go through this. I don't intend to go to too much detail here. You can find this on my website, which is brucewren.com. But also, this is ACE's overall mission statement as an organization. Our mission is to empower individuals with integrity and purpose, enhancing their influence in ways that inspire trust, respect, and a positive change. Through leadership principles and personal growth coaching, we aim to help clients develop effective communication skills, build meaningful connections, and make impactful, value-driven decisions. We are dedicated to fostering a foundation of authenticity and empathy, enabling individuals to elevate their influence and create a vision that contributes to a more principled and successful organization. Very detailed, the mission statement always should be to make sure we're conveying the message to the folks that we're attempting to bring in as clientele and maximize their performance as individuals. But it's easier if you just think about it as our service theme, which is real simple. At ACE ICS, we develop leaders by equipping executives with the tools they need to lead. Everybody wants to be a good leader, but not all of us know how to do that. Certainly during this presentation and our conversation and subsequent conversations we'll have down the road, we intend to be able to show you the tools you need in order to lead and become an effective leader as part of your leadership development journey. And we're confident we have the skills, we'll be able to convey the skills to you in an understandable way and allow you to leverage those in the future as you go down your career path to maximize the performance of your team, to increase the likelihood that you have an opportunity to be promoted, to increase your influence within an organization, and portable skills you can take anywhere you're going to want to go down the road if you decide to transition to a different entity, that you will be fully equipped to succeed in that opportunity. Moreover, when you talk about principled leadership, oftentimes it can be irrelevant to our personal lives, whether it be with friends or certainly with family. If you're a parent, some of the messages of this conversation are certainly going to be relevant in parenting world, as all of us as leaders want to make sure we're maximizing the performance of the people we care about. So, focusing on leadership development and specifically principled leadership, there's going to be 4 items we'll focus on today. The first one is vision-driven leadership. You have to establish a clear vision in order as a foundation in order to be successful in the longer term. And I intend to illustrate some specific examples of people who are great visionary leaders. Secondly, we're going to briefly discuss leadership styles because there are variant. I've captured 8 of the most prominent styles. There's others. Some of them will be referred to differently than what I may brand them as a leadership style, but certainly identifying the best leadership style for us and in the situation we're in is critically important. Third, we're going to talk about leadership versus management. And there's a key distinction here that I really want to make sure I convey. So that way you'll understand that management's about taking care of today. Leadership makes sure you have a better tomorrow. And then finally, the fourth area, but critically important, is principled leadership, focusing on the areas we intend to evaluate in our discussions and hopefully setting the table for us to have further discussions down the road as we help educate you how to capitalize on principled leadership to maximize your performance and the performance of your team. So, John Wooden, famous basketball coach for University of California, Los Angeles, or UCLA, one of the most successful leaders in history. I know when I went to John Maxwell Leadership Institute in Atlanta and attended their program, I asked them, according to their research, who do they consider to be the greatest leader of all time? They specifically referred to John Wooden. If you know anything about John, if you don't, I encourage you to research him. If you go to the arena at UCLA where they play today, Pauley Pavilion, you'll still see pictures of John on the wall, as well as his pyramid of success, which he was famously developed and utilized to help convey lessons in leadership to the people at his organization there at UCLA, as well as elsewhere. Business leaders all over the world capitalized on John's knowledge. Just to give you some tangible results John achieved as a leader at UCLA while being basketball coach there, he won 10 national college basketball titles, 7 consecutive. His team won almost 90 games in a row at one time. A very successful leader. John once said, "Success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to become the best of which you are capable," which means self-actualization, reaching your potential. I'll tell you a brief story, which is going to be interesting, but also convey an important message about being a successful leader as a visionary and principled leadership. John Wooden would have basketball practices at UCLA. His very first practice of every single season, he would bring the players into the gymnasium, have them sit on the bench, and he would show them how to put on their socks and shoes. And he would say, unless we put on our socks and shoes properly, we won't play to our full potential. This is a great illustration of starting with the basics and building toward more complicated principles and levels of success. Certainly, all the players who played basketball on his team knew how to put on their socks and shoes, and certainly their parents probably showed them at one time how to put on their socks and shoes properly. But John understood as a leader, you start with the basics and then build up toward more information to make sure everybody's fully knowledgeable and there's a point of critical mass for the understanding of expectations, as well as being able to play to your full potential. Some advice we can take from a great leader to maximize our performance. So in area 1, we're going to focus on vision-driven leadership. What that means is creating a vision and communicating that vision to the team in an understandable fashion so everyone understands where you're trying to go. Vision sets the stage for success. What is vision-driven leadership? Vision-driven leadership refers to the ability of a leader to create clear, inspiring, and strategic picture of the future for the team. It's about seeing where the group needs to go and communicating the vision in a way that drives success. A strong leadership vision provides direction, purpose, and a sense of possibility, what you can possibly achieve as a team. Why is vision-driven leadership important? Why does it matter? Well, there's a lot of different reasons, but I just want to break down a few so that way everyone will fully comprehend the importance of vision and being a visionary as it relates to leadership. First of all, it creates a critical focus. Everyone on your team will know the level of leadership that you want to have and the vision in order to achieve those objectives. That's very important. They will understand the parameters of which the expectations they're expected to perform in and what the goals are you're collectively trying to achieve. Secondly, it will develop trust and commitment. Commitment to the ultimate goal you're trying to succeed in by being a visionary leader, but also develop trust that your team will feel confident that you are supportive of them because you're communicating that message to them in an understandable fashion and they clearly understand the collective objectives they're trying to achieve. Third, it will create positive momentum. Typically, what that means is when you create a vision that's understandable and everyone feels comfortable with, that creates positive momentum toward achieving those objectives. You might not get there initially, but eventually you can certainly get there. Employee engagement is enhanced. Ultimately, if your employees feel as though they're being engaged by the leader and the vision will help them feel engaged because they'll understand you're communicating the overall goals of the organization, that will enable you to become a positive leader and engage employee engagement, which will mean you'll get maximum dedication. Some employees will decide based upon their comfortability working within the parameters of you as a leader, how much they want to dedicate to the ultimate success. You want to go from a small level of commitment to ultimate dedication, where they'll go above and beyond. That's what a visionary leader is capable of doing. It also creates resilience. We're all going to go through difficulty in businesses and in our personal lives from time to time. If you create a vision which is understandable, people will be resilient and stick with you because they understand you know where you ultimately want to go, even though right now there might be a few speed bumps in the road. And also, it encourages innovation for people to think outside the box and try some new things, perhaps. And that certainly is important in a new vision. A good illustration of visionaries for the American culture, President John F. Kennedy in the 1960s, he had a famous speech where he announced America would go to the moon before the year 1970. At the time, most pundits thought that that was a ridiculous goal because NASA certainly wasn't even fully established at that stage, and we didn't have the technology in place at the time to achieve that objective. But ultimately, when the leader, in this case John F. Kennedy, committed to that goal, they were able to excel and achieve that objective 2 years earlier by reaching the moon in that period of time, because the leader said it's going to be a challenge, but if we commit collectively to reach this goal and engage our people to make that happen, we can reach this goal or even exceed it, which was what happened with our trip to the moon back in the 1960s in America under the initial impetus of John F. Kennedy as president. So we're going to do a quick vision exercise here. How can you use vision-driven leadership to enhance team success? Think about that for a minute. Then we'll come back together and talk about it collectively and try and ascertain some of the best suggestions about how we can leverage vision-driven leadership to enhance our team success. Everybody think about that and then come on back in. Thanks. Great exercise, everybody. Some great feedback and some suggestions for down the road. I specifically, Craig, like your suggestion related to using vision to drive success and the illustration you gave about the examples you had when you were in the music industry. That's the kind of stuff we can all benefit from. We've all got different areas we've utilized our leadership in. All of them serve as good examples and teachable moments for us to be more successful. Keys to vision-driven leadership. First, it creates a clear direction for where you want to go. What do we want to achieve? Second, it's motivational. Everyone can feel engaged and they're likely to get on board and try and drive collectively toward the team's success. Third, and this is very important, it needs to have a long-term focus. It's not going to focus on a goal you're just trying to achieve today in today's time. That would be more of a management function, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Vision-driven leadership is focused on the long term. Where are you now? Where do you want to go? And how do you intend to get there? Fourth is adaptability, because certainly markets change from time to time and resources will either escalate or go down depending upon how we're doing in the markets. So you have to be adaptable and trying to adjust the goals. Typically, if you utilize benchmarking within your business to try and drive performance, that's a good illustration of a management task. When you utilize vision to focus on long-term goals, that's going to be adaptable and you can fluctuate those benchmarking goals to have long-term success and work with your people to achieve those objectives. Organizational culture is very important. A good vision will help set the stage towards an organizational culture which enables you to succeed. which leads me to the final point, but a very important one, which is communication. Vision communicated in an understandable way from the very top down to the bottom, the front line in this case, is going to enable you to be successful. We need to make sure not only the leaders are aware, but also everyone below those leaders are completely cognizant of our goals internally. There needs to be a point of critical mass, which means everyone understands the goal we're attempting to achieve. These are 6 reasons why vision-driven leadership is important. In the American culture, one good illustration of that might be Walt Disney. When he was bringing together the Disney organization, he had to think outside the box about what we're going to achieve, and what are we really? So he obviously starting out originally in animated films and then in movies and creating theme parks after that. Someone who took very little and drove it in another direction to achieve previously unrecognized goals, and goals a lot of people would say was impossible from the outset. You can see by utilizing all 6 of these areas, he was able to capitalize on a clear direction, motivating people, a long-term focus, being adaptable as obstacles were overcome, creating an organizational culture relevant within the Disney culture in this example, communicating it to the team, even from a cartoon mouse in Mickey Mouse's situation, to achieve those objectives. A great illustration of visionary leadership. Dolly Parton, famous entertainer and philanthropist, and certainly somebody I look to for motivation, as she's done so many incredible things in movies, certainly in music, but as well as helping charities of various kinds to be successful that needed that support in order to achieve their objectives. Dolly once said, if your actions create a legacy that inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are an excellent leader. Certainly a transformational leader perspective and an inspiration from a visionary perspective. Dolly brings that to the table. So now we're going to pivot to area 2, which is leadership styles. How do you like to lead? And certainly everyone has a different approach when it comes to leadership. I'd like you to be thinking about which one you're more comfortable with, and it certainly is going to need to vary dependent upon the particular circumstances you're in and where you want to take the team. So the first style, and this gets talked about a lot in the literature in recent years, is servant leadership. This is someone who tries to contribute to the success of the team and lead the team in a positive direction, oftentimes specifically impacting the specific team members they have on the team as individuals. Probably the most notable American example of this is Dan Cathy, the CEO of Chick-fil-A. That he's somebody who's focused a lot on developing servant leadership internally and motivating people to succeed. Chick-fil-A's culture is very distinct from a lot of organizations. There's a lot of folks there who have a real spiritual mentality, and that's part of the reason they joined Chick-fil-A originally. But Dan's certainly successful in bringing Chick-fil-A along. Part of the reason for that is one of the proprietors of servant leadership before it was fully instituted at Chick-fil-A, John Maxwell, based out of Atlanta, who oversees John Maxwell Academy and Institute. Somebody who's the most prolific leadership writer in the American culture is somebody who focuses a lot on servant leadership, both in a spiritual side as well as on the company side. I know John personally. I've had a chance was fortunate enough to be invited to a couple of different events he had of Friends of John for the Institute to bring me in as a collaborative leadership function, which I'll talk about in a minute, to garner great leadership ideas and share them with other leaders. So certainly servant leadership has become a popular type of leadership with forward-thinking organizations. The second type, very popular, is transformational leadership. This is a challenge because it has to go throughout the entire organization. And you must have an impact on everyone in order to align everyone with a similar vision in your leadership challenges, but also to be able to transform from one circumstance to another. That's what a transformational leader is. So certainly Martin Luther King, you could argue, was a transformational leader in terms of what he did from a civil rights perspective in America. But probably a better illustration, a more recent one in terms of corporate entities, would be what Steve Jobs did at Apple. If you know anything about Steve, if you've read his books, seen some of the movies, or done any research, or seen him present, which he's an incredible presenter, he is most notably a transformational leader and focuses on every single detail. That he went to college at Reed College in Portland, Oregon, which is a small school, but academically of one of the best schools in the country. And he decided while he was attending school there, which he didn't finish, that he was going to drop out. It was too much money for his parents to spend, is what he thought. But during the last semester he was there, he typically would sleep in dorm lobbies, sometimes on the couch, and he still wanted to go to some classes, though, to obtain knowledge. And the class he made sure he always attended was calligraphy because he wanted a very specific look to whatever he was going to do down the road. And ultimately, that what that evolved into, if you look at an Apple computer from the 80s or 90s, the font was very distinct, unlike anything anyone else was doing at that time, because he wanted it to draw people's eyes to that, attention to that, and ultimately thought that would help drive success for his company, and he turned out to be true. And he also understood that simplicity is important, but the technology and computers are complicated by nature. Not everybody's going to take to them at the same pace. So he wanted things to be simple. So that's why the iPod and ultimately even the iPhone had one point of initial contact you could do everything else from, because he understood simplicity and making people feel comfortable was critically important for their organization to be successful. A third type of leadership is commanding leadership. This is somebody who takes command and drives the organization or country, in some cases, forward during difficult circumstances. Typically, military leaders or presidents sometimes get credit for this. A good example internationally, would be Winston Churchill and what he did with the British during World War II to drive them and stay focused toward success during very challenging times. In American sports, there's also typically coaches in athletics can often have a commanding style, requiring people to have certain expectations upon them and letting them know what those expectations are, and then dealing with it when those expectations aren't met. A couple of good examples in American, if you're into American football, Nick Saban at Alabama or Bill Belichick in his coaching background in professional football and the NFL are good illustrations of people who consider themselves to be commanders or commanding leaders. Sometimes you'll see this referred to as authoritarian leadership, but it all deals with being in command and driving the team forward towards success. The fourth area is collaborative leadership, and this is a challenging one sometimes, but certainly is one which can be successful if you can get everyone on board. In American politics, one of the most successful collaborative leaders would probably be considered to be Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War and getting the Emancipation Proclamation passed, was certainly somebody who claims to be collaborative, but was able to achieve objectives due to some of that collaboration through enormous obstacles, certainly. And another illustration more recently, but if you think about the company Lego, that they several years ago were trying to grow the company, and they thought they were in a mature industry in terms of kids' toys, and they wanted to try and find a way, and this is a European-based company, by the way, to find a way to drive performance and financials most notably. So they were very collaborative throughout the company. Give us whatever thoughts you have which can improve us and give us other opportunities. And what came back internally was a suggestion that they should diversify and go into other areas they hadn't previously. So they started thinking about where can we take Legos to not be just considered a kid's toy, but to go in other directions. And they thought about partnering with major franchises. Probably the most successful and notable franchise is Star Wars, but there's a number of other franchises out there they partnered with to be successful. And ultimately, that even led to them being successful with Warner products and the movies on the big screen. Obviously, a company which has grown to be enormously successful and profitable based upon their collaborative leadership style and capitalizing on the best ideas which emerge internally in order for them to be successful as a company. The fifth area of leadership I want to talk about briefly is situational. This is somebody who's trying to address a specific situation in order to succeed. And this will obviously be something you might do, not always utilize, but if you're in a unique scenario, you would apply situational leadership. If you go to a business school in America nowadays or research people who are considered situational leaders, a good example for us is Warren Buffett, both with Berkshire Hathaway as well as with his time with GE. He was somebody who tried to approach, whether it be his television business, NBC, or the work at GE or elsewhere, in a specific situation, he would try and evaluate how can I best lead within these parameters. So he's a good illustration of a situational leader who was notably successful. Now, he would tell you in his multiple books that he focused on top performers and driving their performance to drive to success throughout the organization. And I encourage you to read some of that literature as a background if you're thinking about being situational. Not every situation is the same. We need to know that as leaders, but adapting to the situation and properly constructing a leadership style which is appropriate for that situation and that scenario can allow you to be successful. Sixth is transactional leadership. So certainly, in America and internationally, oftentimes politicians are transactional leaders. If you support this proposal of mine, I'll support your proposal over here. So transactional is very common for political leaders, but it can be applicable in other areas as well. probably in America, the company that most recently tried to feature transactional leadership when Bill Gates was starting Microsoft and getting it going. If you read some of the background there, or watch some of the TV series that have been done about it, a transactional leader in the way he started that entity to try and drive performance by Microsoft, which obviously became enormously successful. Notably, though, when he developed the Bill and Melinda Gates organization for philanthropic efforts, he chose collaborative, and that's what they focused on. So obviously, this is a good illustration of varying your leadership style for the specific situation you're in. Transactional can be successful, but it may not last in the long term, as you won't always have something to give back someone to lead in accordance with your expectations. Seventh is authentic. A lot of people claim to be authentic leaders, but not everyone can meet that level of expectation. It's a very challenging thing. Now, with authentic, you're trying to be authentic to your people. So you have to be transparent, tell them everything they need to know, tell them what your thought process is, and bring them in on where you want to go. Solicit some feedback. So it certainly is related to collaborative. But being an authentic leader is a high bar to reach, and not everyone's going to be able to get there. It's going to be somewhat dependent upon the culture you're operating within. Probably the most notable American leader who gets credit for being authentic would be Howard Schultz and what he did at Starbucks and the direction he took the company. You can look at some of the research related to Starbucks and the way they grew. A lot of the success, and obviously it was enormous success for a long time, in terms from a financial perspective, was based upon the authentic leader that Mr. Schultz appeared to be in terms of driving the organization forward. Then the eighth area is more hands off, and that's laissez-faire leadership style. Typically, this is only going to be successful in a culture where you have people who are highly experienced and highly dedicated and highly knowledgeable about the area, perhaps even more knowledgeable than you. So this may be a good leadership style right after a merger and acquisition, if a leader is just getting familiar with the culture and the workings of the organization. But it can also be successful when you're working with highly talented people. A good example of being laissez-faire would be Netflix, the American company, which has become internationally successful. They have very talented and knowledgeable people who develop their entertainment talent. So they are notably and brag about being laissez-faire and allowing people the room they need to develop. And obviously that's allowed them to go from just hosting other people's series to developing their own series, their own movies. Now they're doing live sporting events, been very successful from a bottom line perspective. But certainly that's a good illustration of being knowledgeable within an organization, but knowing other people might be more knowledgeable and delegating them the authority to give you the feedback you need in order to succeed, and the autonomy from an empowerment perspective to enable you to achieve objectives. So something to think about. One thing I do want to point out as a sidebar, but I want to make sure that I communicate it successfully. If I mention a company or even a leader of political background, or even a coach in athletics, it doesn't mean I'm advocating everything that they do. Certainly there's advantages and disadvantages to every leader, but rather I'm trying to illustrate someone who could be argued to be successful as a leader and the way they achieve those objectives. No leader is perfect, and that's something we need to understand in our leadership journey. We just want to try and be as good as we can be, and if we do that and we stay dedicated to that, and we're principled and visionary in the way we communicate our message, that gives us a higher likelihood of success in the longer term. So with that in mind, let's do a quick discussion topic. What style of leadership do you prefer to use? What are you most comfortable with? Go ahead and give that some thought, and then we'll come back and talk about it collectively as a team. Great feedback from our exercise related to leadership styles. Mike, I appreciated your thought about where you are as a leader, how you want to be collaborative, but also want to be authentic if you can be. I know you're in a new situation there as a leader at that organization. It's good that you're sensitive to the needs that they have, and you're trying to make sure you're adaptable to meet those needs. Great feedback from the team. I'm going to move ahead and focus on area 3, which is leadership versus management. And as I alluded to earlier, there's a distinction, and it's about balancing priorities. Let me explain a little more extensively. Management, here defined, task-oriented, centered on pace setting, which means designing what people do. Some people would argue pace setting is a style of leadership. I don't necessarily think that's true. Like benchmarking, for example, would be an example of pace setting, but it can be helpful to leaders who are successful pace setters. Task-oriented, centered on pace setting, organizing, controlling, and optimizing resources, and executing current processes to achieve specific objectives. That's management. Whereas if we flip the script and talk about leadership, leadership focuses on inspiring, motivating, and guiding people toward a shared vision and long-term goals. Leaders create a sense of purpose inspire action, and drive change. That's huge because really leadership is focused on where are we going and how do we get there, whereas management focuses on what's the best we can do today. There's a lot of good managers who are successful leaders, but it's going to be difficult to be a successful leader if you're not a good manager. And you have to make sure you're trying to lead routinely with your vision and your actions and your leadership styles in order to be successful. Let me go into a little more detail. This right here is a table that illustrates the distinctions between management versus leadership. Now you'll notice as you look at the left side of the screen, the various aspects, the focus, approach, decision-making, people, time horizon, orientation, and risk. And then in each of the categories next to that, management is very much about taking care of the day. For example, with focus, efficiency, task completions, and systems, whereas leadership to juxtaposition and look at it differently is focused on vision, inspiration, long-term goals, and where you want to go directionally. So there's a difference. Probably the greatest illustration of the distinction between the two can be seen in the risk category. Risk, from a management perspective, you are typically going to try and minimize risk and uncertainty. You want to make sure everyone firmly understands what you're trying to achieve. But if you're a leader, you typically will embrace risk and challenge the status quo, but only if you have confidence in the team. So this means they understand your leadership style, the vision is clearly established, you think you can collectively be successful as a leader. That's a big distinction, where in terms of management focusing on today, whereas leadership will focus on progress toward tomorrow and achieving our shared collectives over a longer period of time. This particular table was generated on AI on ChatGPT. I just wanted to try and find, because typically that'll give ChatGPT, but AI as an entity most notably will give you feedback related to analytics and specifics that is the consensus of what the research says. So in this case, I would use them as the reference point, but you can see that leadership is distinct from management and the various aspects that you'll do because it's got a more long-term success-oriented philosophy and focus. So Peter Drucker, author, business consultant, expert, some have even called him the father of modern management and American corporations, once said, management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. Do you see the distinction? Management focuses on doing specific details in executing them in a successful way, whereas leadership is really more about doing the right things overall collectively to enable us to be successful in the longer term. Folks need management and they need leadership, but that leadership's a critical component. Don't get so overwhelmed with leading on a daily basis that you're only managing, you're not leading toward tomorrow. So let's do a quick practice session. Name something that is a management function and another item that is more leadership related. We'll go ahead and take a few minutes to think about this, and then we'll come back and talk about it as a team. Great breakout session, had some great feedback there. I thought the illustration, that was given to us by Carrie was a great one, that a management function might be like writing an employee schedule to make sure you have people in place if you're in a business which entertains consumers on a regular basis, on a daily basis, probably. Whereas if you flip the script, when you're looking at recruiting people to come in, hiring them, getting them onboarded so they can potentially participate, that's all more leadership oriented and has a daily impact on the team fundamentally, because it allows you to convey your vision as a leader and the message in terms of expectations so they firmly understand what they're trying to achieve as a group, but also enlightens them where you're trying to go down the road, that's not just about showing up and doing your job, it's about maximizing your performance on the job so the organization maximizes its performance overall. That's the distinction, and great job, Carrie, at mentioning your thoughts, and you're spot on with that perspective on things. So the importance of a leadership-focused success as opposed to management focus. First of all, it will typically motivate and inspire people to contribute to the success of the team. Secondly, it will build relationship trust so you can achieve objectives collectively, successfully moving forward. Third, it creates a culture of empowerment. People will feel as though they can work within the parameters that you've established in order to excel. So little things you might have paid attention to as a manager become less important when your vision is in place, and when as a leader, you've inspired them where you want to go, as they'll feel empowered and thus contribute more to the success of the organization and be committed and dedicated to the goals that you've outlined. Fourth, and this is very important, it develops future leaders. It develops talent in a way in which people feel as though there's a higher level of expectation, but also that they can reach that level or potentially exceed that level of expectation. That's going to help develop and foster future leaders. Some organizations grow too rapidly and kind of it becomes an obstacle for them. I remember Starbucks 2007, 2008 had a very aggressive growth strategy where they were opening literally 6 Starbucks a day somewhere in the world. Some of them were inside of shopping centers or mini Starbucks inside of a mall. So they weren't all full-blown brick and mortar Starbucks, but they found they weren't able to develop enough talent indigenously to be able to support that massive level of growth. So they went back and redid their training program, got their people better understand the expectation level. They even closed half the facilities that they operate on a day in order to retrain everyone to achieve those objectives. And they marketed that and branded it back to their clientele, letting them know if we make a mistake on your drinks, we'll improve it right away down the road, bring it right to us. It'll be fixed with no charge. So they actually leverage from a marketing perspective, training in order to achieve success. So that's a good illustration of helping develop future leaders. And when you're going too fast, slow down and then engage your people. That'll help you develop more leaders down the road. And then fifth, and very importantly, long-term impact and strategic direction. When you focus on leadership, you'll be able to have that. Management's still important for the day-to-day, but that leadership vision of the future is very important. Your people are cognizant of it to a point of critical mass. That means everyone understands it, and you give them the tools they need in order to succeed. That leads us to the fourth area, principled leadership, which we believe is mission critical. In order for you to achieve your objectives, principled leadership is critically important. Let me explain elaborate a little more significantly. What is principled leadership? Principled leadership is a leading approach grounded in unwavering ethical values and integrity. It prioritizes character and charisma, long-term impact over short-term gain, and the well-being of stakeholders over the individual or organizational self-interest. Principled leaders inspire trust, foster collaboration, create meaningful and sustainable change. That's about materially impacting the betterment of the organization and the individual. And that's where principled leadership will enable you to be successful. It's the secret sauce in the leadership equation to maximize the performance of yourself as well as your team. So, principled leadership benefits. These are typically some of the ones which surface most notably. First, it builds trust and loyalty. People will want to be committed to an organization they feel as though the principles are strong and they're conveyed to the team in which it's an understandable and a way in which it's genuine. It's got to be organic. Principled leadership, you can't fake it. It has to be from the heart. And if it comes from the heart, you might find you can capture your people's hearts and minds. That's what really drives performance. Second, it creates a positive culture. Everyone feels invested, they feel included, and they're likely to contribute toward success because of the principles the organization has. Aligns values and actions. They will understand the values due to the vision, and the execution of that is with the actions, which are the principles that you have. I'll talk more extensively about that over the next couple of slides. It inspires leading with integrity and purpose. This is very, very important. Integrity is necessary from an organizational perspective just to operate within the legal parameters, whether you're talking about from a human resource perspective or if you've got shareholders, making sure you're reaching their expectations. You have to make sure you're doing business above board, but it also creates purpose for your people in order to succeed. And then finally, it encourages growth and sustainable success. If you are a good principled leader, you'll be able to get long-term success that is sustainable and will encourage constant growth as you create synergies internally to lead toward even more success down the road. So, what principles come to mind when we discuss principled leadership? Give that some thought, then we'll come back and discuss it as a team. Okay. Excellent feedback. Great principles brought up. These are the principled program that we're doing at ACE. Independent Consulting Services is focused on 8 specific areas right now. It's a 10-week program, but there's 8. The first week is that just get everyone onboarded. We focus on a gap analysis to bring people up to speed. Weeks 2 through 9 are the items that I'm about to go through and identify for you specifically. And then finally, week 10 closes out everything with a grand finale, gets people to evaluate the skills they've gained, find out how they can best leverage those, as well as sets the table for your roadmap forward. Where do we take all of these tools we now have, our quivers that we may have? Our quiver is full with arrows. How do we best utilize those to be successful down the road? The first principle of leadership for ACE is the promotion principle. This is when you first get promoted into a new position or you're starting a new role. That's the very starting point. A lot of people think if I'm a leader, if I have a title, that enables me to be a leader automatically. That's not necessarily the case. The promotion principle relays the fact you've got to make sure you are cognizant that your team only sees you as starting out. They're going to decide how much dedication to give you, dependent upon what they think of you as a leader and the message that you're conveying. That's the promotion principle. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's something that's a very important principle to be a good leader. Secondly, the proper principle. This is about ethics and integrity, which principled leadership, certainly that's part of the foundation of it. It's a key component. We're also going to discuss in this module how to embrace human resources as they're really the executable function on the vision you create and the principled centered leadership that you've ingrained within your infrastructure. So we're going to talk about best ways to utilize HR and communicate with them in a way in which you can drive operational success. Third is the patience principle. This is about once you've got the job and you understand the vision and the ethics and integrity in place, how do we be patient to build the team? What do the key players look like? How do the various leadership principles get engaged to enable long-term success? This phase is oftentimes critically important to long-term success. The fourth module focuses on the people principle, and this most notably will focus on communication. That not only certainly written communication, but also direct communication, levels of communication, all of that is a factor when you talk about the people principle. If you're really going to capture their hearts and minds, the fourth chapter, people principle, is something we all want to make sure you firmly understand, and then how to capitalize on it once you're back in the workplace or in terms of a family relationship as well. Communication is a critical component. The fifth module is the peaceful principle. Once you understand how to properly communicate, you're going to want to make sure that you handle that properly within the workplace. We've all worked with difficult people. You can't go anywhere in life and not engage someone who is not necessarily on board right away. This is about conflict resolution, dealing with difficult team members. We'll talk a little about, certainly workplace violence and how to manage those sorts of situations. But the peaceful principle is very, very important. The culture today has never been more divided. And everyone may have different beliefs that they have that are important to them, and they might not respect someone else who doesn't share those same beliefs. But we have to come together as a team in order to achieve objectives collectively. So that's where the peaceful principle comes in, working with everyone to achieve shared objectives and maximize team performance. 6 is the perfection principle. This is more about failure than perfection. We're all going to fail sometimes. It's about how do we capitalize on that failure to enable us to be successful. If you mention virtually anyone who's been a significant political leader or an athlete within a company as well, you can usually find where areas in which they've struggled. It's how did they learn from that? So it's not about failure, it's about failing forward. What did we learn from that failure to ultimately enable us to be successful? 3M is a good example. They were developing a glue back in the 1980s, which wasn't very adhesive in their R&D department. They ended up taking scratch paper, putting the glue on the back of the scratch paper and sending it up to the executives at 3M. And a few months later, the executives called down and said, hey, send up more of these sticky notes. We use them all the time and they're fantastic. Those ultimately became marketed as Post-it notes, one of the most successful office supplies ever commercially available. Goes to show you from what can be perceived as failure, a lot of great things can happen if you focus on failing forward. What did we learn and how can we capitalize on the knowledge we've obtained? Perspective principle. This is about the various levels of hierarchy you'll be within a company. Maybe you don't have a team. Maybe you have a small team. Maybe your team is developing. Perhaps you want to be a senior executive or a CEO or COO down the road, a CFO. All of that requires perspective. Your leadership style should be tailored to the level of authority you have right now and to your team, and should be flexible enough to be tweaked to enabling you to be successful once you're in a different situation. This leadership training is relevant to every person, regardless of their level of leadership right now or hierarchy. The perspective principle helps you capitalize on that and understand you need to vary your leadership style dependent upon your perspective at the time, and that means your level of hierarchy. Finally, the priority principle. This is a great reminder for all of us. We can't change what happened yesterday, and we can't live tomorrow today. But if we have a good today, that can lead toward a better tomorrow. So the most important day in your life is today. Today matters most. The success we have today will enable success tomorrow. So that's why the priority principle is to focus on today to allow for better days down the road. We'll talk about that more in our conversations about principled leadership moving forward. The end of the day, principled leadership empowers teamwork to make the dream work. That's how it works. So, all together, working collectively towards shared objectives to achieve those objectives, that's what principled leadership is focused on and all about. So, John Maxwell, famous leadership expert, probably the most prolific American author on leadership, and he has books of less than 100 pages to several hundred pages. So, regardless how much time you've got to invest, John's a great starting point if you're looking to become a better leader. If you and I are going to grow, we have to grow on purpose. Mentoring is not about creating followers, it's about creating more leaders. So, one of the things we're going to focus on in principled leadership is about the mentoring process and about continuing to grow as an individual. Because your people in your organization will only continue to grow if you grow as a leader. So, it's really important you're focusing on your continual growth. The principled leadership program we're offering at ACE will enable you to do that and to sustain growth in the future, whether you're involved in the program or not. Principled leadership. Do you want to get principled leadership results in the next few weeks? Develop and communicate a clear vision. Establish a leadership style that's best for you, understand how to leverage principled leadership to be successful, and implement solutions to enhance performance right away. Principled leadership that we are offering will enable you to do that. It'll give you the tools you need to succeed and lead. So our offer right now is a free 30-minute introductory call to identify your specific leadership needs and solutions, and then we will specifically develop a leadership solution for you that is tailored to your situation, focusing on all the modules that I just alluded to previously. All of those are going to be part of the pie when we talk about the comprehensive solution you're going to have available to you as a leader. This will enable you to be a better leader as an individual. It'll maximize the performance of your team. It'll enhance your influence internally, and it will be portable skills that you can take with you wherever you go to enable you to be perpetually an excellent leader as long as you continue to focus on these leadership principles that we're enabling you at ACE to fully understand and to capitalize on. It's what you need to lead and succeed. So, I am Bruce Rand, again, Senior Executive and Leadership Coach at ACE, coach at ACE Independent Consulting Services. We've got some time for questions and answers here at the end. I am a principled leadership expert, and I'm also a transformational leader. I look forward to working with you in the future and making your leadership the best in the business, whatever your business might be. So with that in perspective, let's open it up for Q&A. Appreciate everyone's time today, but let's come work together collectively as a team, you and me, to enable you to lead and succeed. That's what I'm all about. That's what I want it to be about for you. I appreciate your time today. Thanks again. Come to ACE. We'll point you in the direction you need to go to get solutions from a leadership perspective. Thanks for your time.